So last time we were discussing was databases, and we discussed different SQL commands, if you remember. And we also did discuss about normalization, if you can remember all that. We discussed the first normal form. In fact, we started from zero normal form. Then we discussed the first normal form, the second normal form, and the third normal form. Okay, just a recap of what normalization is, that normalization means that we have to get rid of redundant data. uh, okay, any repeating entries that we have, any repeating groups that we have. When we go towards a second normal form, we are going to make sure that we do not have any partial dependencies. Now, what do I mean by partial dependency is that, for example, in a customer table, we are not concerned with the supplier. So if I have supplier's information in the customer table, the supplier information is partially dependent. Okay. So functionally dependent is when you have customer ID and the customer name. Customer ID is fully functionally dependent on the customer name. That is perfectly fine. But when you have entities, when you have fields that do not have any direct relationship or are not dependent, we call them partial dependencies. And these need to be eliminated. So this is the process that you go through from zero normal form to third normal form. Am I clear on that? Any confusion? It was just a recap. Yes, Uswa?
Yes, sir, understood.
Yeah, right. So let's continue with this. Obviously, the facilities provided by a database management system, apart from the SQL, there are more that we will discuss today. Uh, we will be discussing about the DDL, okay, which is the data definition language. Okay. Now, all this, I am not going to do it practically with you. I'm just going to explain you through this way because it's not in our syllabus to do it practically. So SQL was fine, but this I can just explain you in just from here. And that would require more time, and fine, we don't need to do that. So data definition language is used and is a part of SQL uh, for creating or altering tables. If you want to create a table or if you want to alter a table, we will be using the DDL. How it's used, it's very simple again. Uh, for example, I can say create database, this one, band booking, create table, band. I create a database, create database, this, create database. And in a database, you can create table because obviously in a one database, you can have multiple tables. So if you have one big database file, in one database file, you can have multiple tables within it. Obviously that's the point we can have, right? So we can have individual tables. So create table, this band, okay. Remember when you create table, you have to put it in the brackets, okay. Create table band name is the field name, okay. That's where your character 25 characters can be fit in. Number of members will be integer. You can even alter, like so we could create it or we could alter table. How would we alter? Alter table band and primary key, band name, okay. Alter table band, add primary key. So make band name the primary key. Alter table band booking and foreign key, band name reference, band name. So we're going to make the band name as your foreign key. And you do know what a foreign key is. A foreign key is when a key from some other table is being repeated. It's known as a foreign key. For that,
Sir, I'm confused.
just 1 second. Fayar Heather is in our class. 4B, Fayar Heather.
सर दैट्स अ लिस्ट पे आप अपनी बहन के अकाउंट से साइन इन करें
Okay, right. I'm sorry, who was confused? Uswa, you said?
यस सर, पहले प्राइमरी की बनाते और फिर उसे फॉरेन की बनाते.
नहीं. किसका? नहीं. देखो, ऑर्डर टेबल बैंड, जो बैंड टेबल है ना, this is some other table. This is this table. And then alter table band booking. That's another table. This one. So in this table, your band is a foreign key, and in this table, your band is a primary key. And when you create a relationship between a foreign key and a primary key, and you do know it's one to many. It's one to many relationship. You remember that.
सर फॉरेन की क्या होता है?
A foreign key basically is a key which is being repeated and was a primary key somewhere else. Let me explain with some other example. अगर आपको इससे confusion हो रही है. For example, you have is a customer table. Okay, you have a customer table. Customer table में obviously आपके पास क्या क्या होगा? You will have is the customer ID. Okay, customer की ID होगी. Customer का नाम, customer का age, customer का address, phone number. Yes, fine. So customer ID is a primary key in a customer table. Absolutely correct. And then you have another table in for your store, which is known as your sales table. In your sales table, obviously sales table की एक अपना होना चाहिए. So sales table में you will also have an ID which will be known as your sales ID. Okay, I can't write it down, but obviously it's a sales ID. But at the same time, in the sales table, you will also have is the customer ID as well. You will have customer ID. And then you will have other sales details, such as the number of amount of things, what product was sold, and so on and so forth. But not our concern right now. The point to note over here is that sales table में जो customer ID है, this customer ID will be repeated because, for example, I have an ID 1 and the following customer came, his ID was, let's say, 001, bought the following thing. And then another ID, again, the customer 001 came and bought the following thing. So in the sales table, your customer ID will be repeated. But in the customer table, the customer ID, which is 001, will not be repeated. 001 will not be repeated. Okay, because this is a unique key. The customer table will hold information of the customers, and obviously the customer ID has to be unique. So I have details of all the customers in my customer table. Saying that means that customer ID is a primary key over here, and customer ID in the sales table is a foreign key. And the relationship between this customer ID and this customer ID is one to many. Did you get this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. किसने क्वेश्चन पूछा था? Who asked me the question? का foreign key का?
सर मैंने पूछा था.
क्लियर हो गया बेटा?
समझ आ गई.
समझ आ गई. ठीक है. So initially when I defined it, I said that a foreign key is what? A foreign key is when a primary key is being repeated in some other table. So isn't customer ID a primary key that was being used as a primary key in some other table but is being repeated? It is. Customer ID was a primary key and is being repeated. Okay, now whenever you have to work with DLL, obviously you have to remember this, how commands are written. The SQL consists of a sequence of commands. Each command is terminated by this, as you can see over here. Command is, I just made a lot of mess, but they're all terminated by this. The command can occupy more than one line. It's fine. You can have them in multiple lines. You can see over here. I have multiple lines. Okay. There's no case sensitivity. It's fine. Sorry. Sorry, Uswa.
Sir, each command is terminated by this. Each command is terminated by the semicolon.
Yes, semicolon, exactly.
Or by the brackets.
No, semicolon, like this. Right? Isn't this not a command? Like create is a command, isn't it? Create table is not a command. So you create table this, and it's a command. Alter is a command. We're ending with this. Alter table is not a command ending with this. Are these not all commands? And are they not ending with this? You get my point?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no case sensitivity. Yes. There has been a decision made basically here to use uppercase for the commands and lowercase for the table. That you should use this. It's preferred that you should use this for your commands. You should be using the uppercase, and for referring to the table names, referring to the attributes, meaning the fields, you can use lower. And even whenever you're referring to the data types, you can refer to as in lowercase, such as we written integers, such as we written the character. This can be in the lowercase. When a command contains a list of items, these are separated by commas. So if you have multiple lists, you can have them separate through comma separate values. For create table command, this list is enclosed in parentheses. So whenever you have to use a create table, so all the attributes that you will have, you will put them in brackets. That's all what you have to remember in case of this. Okay. Some other time I will also practically do it with you in Access, and I'll show you how to do all this so that you can get more practical experience on this.
सर ये हमारे सिलेबस में है कि हम लोगों ने किस तरह बनाना है इसे?
किसको? जी एग्जाम में आपको आ जाता है, बिल्कुल एग्जाम में बिल्कुल आपको पेपर में आता है. एग्जामिनर गिव्स यू अ पार्ट ऑफ दिस एंड हाउ हेल्प्स यू टू fill it up. इसके हम practice obviously करेंगे. We need to practice it, okay? Before I take your assessment, we'll practice this to the past papers and all that. Then you have is another part of your SQL within your database management system, even in Access. You have is data manipulation language as well, which is known as DML. Now, DML is basically used to insert data into tables. So you initially we did use DDL to create tables, as you can see. We used it to alter the tables, which means we used it to define the primary key. We used it to define the foreign key. We used it to define the data types that will be given to the following fields, and so on and so on. This was part of the DLL. When we talk about DML, it means that we will be manipulating. Manipulating means that we will be inserting values. Okay, now for example, insert into the following band computer keys, add the following data, right, in the 5th row, and insert into band booking into another field, band name, booking ID, values, this and this. So band name, enter this, and booking ID, enter this. So you can see we are actually doing is we are inserting it. Okay, we could even remove it as well. So again, the same rules applies. Parentheses are used in both versions. A separate insert command has to be used for each tuple in the table. There is an order defined for the attributes. All the SQL will have a list. Now they're discussing the SQL, which we have previously. I did discuss this with you in Access, and I did tell you about the different wildcards. Select band name from band, where this is this or this. So remember, last time we did all this. If you can recall, ये सारा हमने last time practice किया था with an Access. If you can recall, याद है? Okay, where this equal this and this is equal to computer keys. मैंने आपको wildcards के through भी explain किया था. Do you remember that? All of you, right? Yes or no? Can you recall it? So,
yes, sir.
SQL के अंदर when you have to extract data, you can use different commands. मैंने हमने wildcards को भी discuss किया था, and so on and so. Okay, right. So when you delete, you'll say delete from band booking where band name is equal to this. Delete from band where band name is equal to this. All of you, do you have Access installed in your laptops?
Yes sir.
Okay, make sure all of you.
सर आप उसकी लिंक भेज देंगे?
मैं भेज दूं, क्योंकि पता है बेहतर ये होगा कि अगर एक बार आप मेरे साथ एक्सेस में प्रैक्टिस कर लोगे ना, तो आई डोंट वांट यू टू क्रैम इट. मतलब मैं चाहता हूं आपको आइडिया भी हो जाए ना. आज तो जरूरत नहीं है मुझे एक्सेस में कराने की, मगर व्हेन यू प्रैक्टिकली डू समथिंग इट्स इजियर. जिस तरह जावास्क्रिप्ट, फ्रैंकली कोई भी टीचर आपको जावास्क्रिप्ट ऐसे से कराता नहीं है उस तरह जिससे मैंने कराया है. मगर द रीजन व्हाई आई डू इज प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज आपको आती होगी तो ऑब्वियसली इट्स पीस ऑफ केक फॉर यू. आप आराम से उसकी कोडिंग लिख लोगे. तो रट्टे लगाऊंगा तो उसका फायदा नहीं है. आई डोंट वांट टू डू दैट. नो क्रैमिंग. तो सेम वे एक्सेस की हमने बैकएंड पे इसकी प्रैक्टिस भी कर लेंगे, रैंडम एग्जांपल्स को भी देख लेंगे. सो इट विल बी यू विल नो व्हाट यू आर डूइंग. यू विल जस्ट नॉट क्रैम थिंग्स. ओके, दिस चैप्टर इज डन एंड नॉट डन बिकॉज हम एक्सेस के समय लिंक भेज दूंगा. आई टेल यू द लिंक, और प्रॉब्ली नेक्स्ट क्लास में हम इसको विद एक्सेस में आपको विद एग्जांपल्स कर लेंगे, एंड वी विल आल्सो डू इट विद द पास्ट पेपर्स एज वेल. नेक्स्ट जो हम स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं today is our part 2. Okay, paper 2 के आज हम beginning कर रहे हैं. You know about your assessment, ठीक है? मगर let me start with part 2. I can't wait for the assessment. कि assessment होगी तो उसके बाद हम start करेंगे. We can at least start with this. So
सर पेपर 1 कंप्लीट हो गया है
क्या बेटा, क्या उसका
पेपर 1
पेपर 1 बेटा क्या?
पूरा कंप्लीट हो गया सर
जी बेटा, चैप्टर 11 तक है ना, पेपर 1 वी आर डन, पेपर 1 हमारा हो गया, मगर आपकी असेसमेंट में ले रहा हूँ 1 to 6, यू शुड रिमेंबर, ओके।
सर जावास्क्रिप्ट आ रही है?
आप लोग बताओ, दूं कि ना दूं?
नो सर
नो,
No, sir.
अच्छा,
No, sir.
हाँ yeah, because some of you missed it and some of you didn't do it well. तो ओके फाइन, ठीक है, आई नॉट इंक्लूड जावा, मगर फाइनल में जावा होगी, फाइनल एग्जाम्स में। सो बिफोर फाइनल वी हैव टू मेक श्योर दैट वी नो इट रियली वेल, ओके। अभी के लिए आई कैन स्किप इट, बट ओके। नाउ we are talking about computational thinking. Now, computational thinking is very important. And why is it important? We have to obviously um, solve things as a system analyst. Okay, the point is that we should develop a logical approach to basically analyze a problem. Okay, um, well, the system life cycle भी इसमें आता है, मगर उसको पहले नहीं करेंगे. Computational thinking will involve abstraction, decomposition, data modeling, pattern recognition, algorithm thinking. We'll talk about all this. Okay, now as far as abstraction is concerned, abstraction का basically मतलब ये है कि to get rid of unwanted information that is not useful for us. Okay, for example, the good example of abstraction will be filtering information that's not necessary. You are traveling from point A to point B using a train, and what happens is that the map in front of you shows you random information. Okay, like the buildings around, the trees around, and all that. No, that's not the point. I'm concerned about different stops, that from point A to point B, how much time will it take? How much kilometers is it from here to here? What are the next destinations? Where does it lead to after that? So on and so. These are the informations that are important for me while I'm traveling. Other information, if it's provided in that particular map, that will be unwanted information. So abstraction basically means that whenever we are solving with problems, we need to get rid of useless information which is not concerned with the current problem that we are working with. So we will remove that. Okay. So we need to remove the complexity as it grows in. This is what abstraction will be. Decomposition will be that we have to break down the problem into smaller program modules. Okay. For this, you do know that you can create procedures and functions. We have studied functions in JavaScripting. Good part है. Python में अब करने के लिए हमें मसला नहीं होगा. So yes, we can decompose. We will also work with classes. Okay. Classes are very good in object-oriented programming language. Classes का फायदा ये होता है कि हर पार्ट को आप different class में डाल सकते हो. आप class को inherit भी कर सकते हो, which means you can use classes somewhere else. So that will be known as classes की inheritance and so on and so. Well, the point is, in simple, let me not take it to a lot of level. Decomposition का मतलब simply है cutting down the problems into small parts so that they're manageable and we can handle them in a proper manner. Right.
सर आप HTML प्रोसेस की बात कर रहे हो
क्या बेटा, किस बात कर रहा हूँ?
HTML वाली क्लासेस की
नहीं, वो डिफरेंट क्लासेस होती है बेटा, दैट आर डिफरेंट क्लासेस. ये ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रोग्राम लैंग्वेज क्लासेस होती हैं. नहीं, आप सीएसएस की बात कर रहे हो ना? एग्जैक्टली, सीएसएस वाली क्लासेस आपको याद होगा, वहां भी कॉन्सेप्ट यही था. रिमेंबर व्हाट क्लासेस वर?
यस
तो एचटीएमएल ना को ना, सीएसएस को. हाँ, सीएसएस वाली क्लासेस.
यस
एडवांटेज ऑफ क्लासेस. ओके, वो डिकम्पोजिशन को एक्सप्लेन करती हैं. अल्फा, यू सेड नो सर, क्या I didn't get the point, no, sir. What are you saying, no, sir? I didn't get it. What do you mean by no, sir? Okay.
सर वो उसने जावा पे कहा था.
Okay. Okay, data modeling basically means that we have to create is a model on which we will be creating everything. We have to analyze the problem and we have to create a real model based on the real facts. Okay, right? Pattern recognition is basically is that we have to see that we will be looking for patterns or common solution to common problems and use these to complete tasks in a more efficient way. Okay, as we proceed further, मैं आपको और भी explain करूँगा what pattern recognition is. Pattern recognition use होता है a lot in your image recognition में भी use होता है. For example, let me explain it. How would you know that this image consists of a cat or a dog? Okay. Well, obviously, uske different patterns hote hain. There's a certain thing that will be fed into the data model. So pattern recognition mein your model is fed in with different entities, and that's how it's recognized. So image recognition and even your facial recognition में pattern recognition use होता है. So every pixel is read and the patterns are saved. Okay. So like it's I mentioned earlier, section 13 में इसकी discussion further होगी. अभी इसकी discussion हम ज़्यादा नहीं कर रहे. So once we reach there, we will discuss it. 23 में and 13 में. So what are algorithms? Well, algorithms, as you do know, are the different ways through which you can solve a problem. You can call it algorithm, you call it logarithms, whatever you may call it. The way,
Sir,
yes.
there is the fetch execute cycle in algorithm.
Fetch execute cycle. No, algorithm data is the different ways you can use to solve a problem. Fetch execute cycle is it's just a no. That's not an algorithm. Don't confuse that with that.
Okay, sir.
Algorithm will be that. For example, listen. I'll give you a good example. You learned about computer aided programming, okay, and you learned about computer aided manufacturing. In computer aided manufacturing, we probably would have discussed in our O levels that we have a robotic arm, and a robotic arm has an end effector at the end, and that end effector sometimes it becomes a riveter, sometimes it becomes a hammer, sometimes it might become a welding gun. Now we just replace the end effectors. So in computer aided manufacturing, the robotic arms that we have, what we all have to do is we have to just change is the algorithm within them. So if I change the algorithm of a hammer, okay, I can use an end effector as a hammer and hammer it. So algorithms will be the steps that my robotic arm has to follow to solve a problem. Okay, and if I have is a riveter or a hammer, I'll use a different algorithm for that. So algorithm is just programming code that you can say that can be used. Now algorithms are in different ways. Well, when we start learning about in computer science, there are three ways we define it. We talk about it as an English prose, we talk about it as in pseudocode, and we talk about flowcharts. These are three ways we can represent algorithms. English prose is a simple way to solve a problem. Okay, for example, you can see over here measuring the following ingredients. This so if you basically want to bake a cake, mix this, pour mixture into the cake tin, bake over this, so on and so you're just explaining through this. So you have done this through simple English prose. You could create this through a flowchart. You could just start, and you could say you could have is over here is a process, measure, and then you could say is another process you need to mix. Then you can have is a condition. that is if the temperature is greater than this, then it should turn off, and if it's not, it should keep on going on and heating it up. So we can use a data flow diagram or flow charts to represent it. That's another way. And then we have pseudocode. We could use as proper structured programming language, saying that you starting with that defining variable a is equal this. If this happens, then do this. Else do this. Then end if. So using normal pseudocode language, structured language, we could explain the problem. Pseudocode is not an actual programming code. It's a generic programming code that tells us that how we can solve this problem. Further, we can use programming language to solve it. Initially, when we have to solve a problem, we will obviously just write an algorithm. Now, these algorithms could, like they're saying over here, algorithms could be done in the simplest way. Because obviously, whenever you have to model a situation as a system analyst, first of all, you have to see how will I solve the problem. So you can just note it down as simple as possible. Later on, we can add it into much more complexity and add more steps to it. Okay. So this is the way it's done. So sometimes a step might need breaking down into smaller steps. For example, step 2 can be in more detail, which was mix the ingredients together in a large bowl until the consistency of the mixture is smooth. Beat the sugar and butter smoothly until fluffy. Add the eggs. So obviously, one particular part can be subcategorized into multiple parts as well, right? Okay, that's example of the map again. So, like I was just talking about, the other way is that we could use is our pseudocode as well. Okay, no. I thought Uswa is asking. Okay, system analyst. Dear Matsuno, there is no software house without a system analyst. I am afraid. Listen, yeah, I want to say this, but obviously, professional software house like NetSol and all that, we will join back again. Hopefully, my battery will last. They obviously definitely need to have is a system analyst. A software engineer is more involved with the development and knows coding. A system analyst obviously has the same knowledge as a software engineer, but this person will be good at analyzing things. The software houses who appoint system analysts, these people have a much broader way or to inspect the situation, are very sharp at looking at where the problem is so that it could be transferred. So system analyst will have good presentation skills, would have a sound knowledge of computer science, would have a very good knowledge to how to create data models and present it to their team. So there is no software house who will not have a system analyst. Okay, because let's say you have to work on a very big project. Okay, you have to go and meet the stakeholders, the owners of the company, for a period of time, and then you collect all the information. Once this information is collected, then you give it to your groups and people who work within the organization and tell them this is what we want. It's not that the entire team of 10 to 20 people will go and meet the owner of a company and say, okay, what do you want? No, that's not the way. Your system analyst, that person, he or she goes, and this is how they do all the fact findings, and that's the way it works. You get my point. So it's quite surprising. There are system analysts, and frankly speaking, if you search for the best paid jobs around the world, I will share with you inshallah today. That okay, it's also on my website. By the way, sasam.com is being updated. Usme information nahi aayegi. We will be using that as well. So I was saying system analysts and software engineers are the most highly paid jobs. I don't know, it keeps on changing every year. I can't say recently, but they are. Obviously, yes, you are an analyst. Business analysts bhi jo hote hain, they are very highly paid people. Because your analysis skills need to be really strong. So I hope I did answer your short question into an elaborated form.
You did.
Right. Okay, so I was just talking about structured English. I was just talking about the pseudocode or flowchart. So your structured English, I just told you what that is. A pseudocode is a type of a programming language using repetition, selection, if then else statement, starting, beginning, and flowchart. I just told you how to create flowcharts. Okay. So, the good thing is that we have actually touched Java before, so you do know what assignment is. When we said variable A is equals to A, we were assigning it. A number of steps are performed after the other. It's a sequence, okay? Okay, when there's repetition, for example, when we discussed the for loop, okay, sequence, and there was a selection, okay, under certain conditions, some steps are performed, otherwise different. When we said variable A is less than and equal to 5, okay, okay, selection and repetition. A sequence step repeated number of times, right? So sequence, selection, repetition, all these will be part of our um, pseudocode as well. Okay. As we proceed doing it, we will keep on talking about them again and again. So input process output for let's have a look at more. Instruction list set A to 24. So that the pseudocode for writing this will be, let me increase this here because let me show you this. Set A to 234. That's the way we'll write in pseudocode. Set A to 34. That's the way we write in pseudocode. I'm repeating again. Increment B plus 1. We have done this before, but in actual language, we were saying it like this. We were saying B is equals to B plus 1. But now when we write a pseudocode, we will represent this through an arrow and we'll say B plus 1. Okay, so remember that. And you also do remember हमने ये भी कहा था B plus plus. Well, that was for the language anyway. You remember that. So that's how you do in pseudocode. If you need to do this in flowcharts, that's the way you will write it down. You will say set A to 34 and you will say increment B. Just need to say increment B, that's it. That's the way it will happen in flowchart. Okay. Selection using the if statement, you could say this. Sorry?
Sir, there is a set way to write pseudocode as well.
Sorry, beta? There is a?
So is there a certain way we're supposed to write a pseudocode?
Yes, there's a certain way. And this is what we'll be learning. Like, for example, right now. Yeah.
So then why do we do pseudocode? Why don't we just write like in code, a language?
Okay. The reason why we have to write in a pseudocode is that we don't want our programmers to be language dependent. For example, I don't want to say that you have to do it in Python. I don't know how to work in Python. I mean, there are like there's so many languages. So you can't say that if you don't know Python, you're not a programmer. No, you can't say that. Someone maybe has much more expertise in some other programming language but not in one language. So pseudocodes are a generic way to tell how problem can be resolved. So if I give a programmer a pseudocode, a list of pseudocode, obviously he or she will interpret it into the language they're using right now. You get my point? So
Yes, sir.
pseudocodes are just a generic form of the way we can represent how a problem could be solved. It's independent of any language.
सर
Yes.
सर हमारे पास ऑप्शन होगी कि हम लोग या तो प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज में लिखें या फिर उसमें लिखें
नहीं बेटा, अब ये जो अब आपका जो है ना योर सिलेबस जो अब शुरू हुआ है, दिस इज द लास्ट वन. आपका 9608 खत्म हो गया, 9618 अब आपका शुरू हो गया. इट्स अ न्यू सिलेबस कोड. अब आपका P4 में यू हैव टू कोड इन अ प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज. We can either do it in VB, we can either do it in Java, or either we can do it in Python. हम इनमें से एक लैंग्वेज में हमें एक लैंग्वेज यूज करनी पड़ेगी. मैंने चूज किया पाइथन आप लोगों के लिए. Okay, हम फिर से O level में I used to choose software. मैं Dreamweaver कहता सबसे अच्छा है, and it is one of the best. Okay, so you can't compete Dreamweaver with any other software development kit. इसी तरह Python is number one. आप गूगल अप कर लो, बेस्ट प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेजेस में आजकल टॉप पे आ रही है जावा स्क्रिप्टिंग एंड पाइथन. सो व्हाई शुड वी गो फॉर थर्ड एंड फोर्थ लैंग्वेज जब पाइथन नंबर 1 पे जा रही है? मैं आपके Questions कहीं बाहर तो नहीं आ गया? So the answer is no. अब हमें we just can't write only in pseudocode. We have to know language. ठीक है? हमें pseudocode भी आना पड़ेगा. We should know how to write in pseudocode, and we should know how to write in a particular language. So before the exams, I will tell British Council that which language we're using and which language. It's just the way it happens in ICT. So no worries about that. In fact, I believe it's better now. जो existing syllabus है P4 का, it was very vague in a way कि आप बच्चे को कह रहे हो कि आप एक कोड लिखो in a way रट्टा लगा के and उसके 8 marks और उसके 8 marks और 6 marks है. No, I mean it's not easier when you're doing it on computer. You can come up with the option and you can actually see it's working or not. Do you agree with me? मैं अगर आपको अभी कहता हूँ कि मुझे ना पेपर पे एक कोड लिख के दो, हाँ लिख लोगे आप if you're good at it. But if I give you much more complex situation, you will need much more effort to write, erase it, write again. Computer में जब live up कर रहे होते आसान होता है. And very good कि उन्होंने changes की हैं. मैं काफी साल से कह रहा था कि you should add one practical part in CS as well. Don't make them do the root learning. कोई फायदा नहीं इसका होगा. 10 सालों बाद उन्होंने चेंज किया है. Okay? Long time back पहले इन पास था. Did I answer your question, beta?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. So selection is obviously using the if command. So if A is greater than B, then do this, else do this. I mean, this is your simple structure English. You should also know the structure English. You get a question of structure English as well. For example, they could give you a problem and they could say, and they could give you this 8-mark question. They will say, write it in structure English, write it in pseudocode, and write it in flowchart as well. So you need to do on all 3 of them. If you represent this in a pseudocode, that would be that if A is greater than B, then else and if. So you can see if and else if they're coming in one line, you are using a proper indentation, indented properly. So that's the way you do it in a pseudocode. Much more structured. When we say structured, we talk about indentation. That's what structured means. Structuring means placing your parts of the loops